So I was putting on my headphones and I now realize that my headphones are falling apart. So now I need to get new headphones and I got to save up for new headphones and I'm kind of bummed about that. But aside from that, everything else is going pretty good. So with that, welcome to this week's episode of Divergence and Divine. My name is WIllspiration and today I kind of just want to talk about, I guess, a little bit of what's been going on in the news in terms of the autism community. Now, normally I wouldn't talk about politics or anything going on in the news because while it's good to know what's going on, it's also very easy to get sucked into the news. And I feel like the way that the news is portrayed, regardless of whatever side you're on, and I'm talking strictly from US because I'm in the US, but regardless, it just seems to be a way to divide and conquer. You got news stations that are saying one side is right and the other side is wrong, and vice versa. At the end of the day, both sides do some things that are, that are good, that are helpful, and they do things that are not helpful. And I feel like the whole idea is, divide and conquer, right? If one side hates the other side and vice versa, you can't really get a country to come together, right? So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it is good to know that regardless of whatever side you're on, you're more likely to believe what your side is telling you as opposed to listening to the other sides. So I just kind of want to put that out there, that to keep in mind when you have political views, to keep an open mind on other people's views and do your own research on both sides, because the media does lie about both sides and makes you think, oh, this side is completely wrong and they're unhinged and they're, many bad things, and vice versa. So you really need to do your own individual research, because when you really stop to look at it, both sides do things that are actually beneficial, and then they do things that are very harmful, and then they do things that are kind of neutral. They're not really beneficial, but they're not really harmful. So that's always something that I like to keep in mind, because the amount of fighting is ridiculous, especially when we're all adults. Like, come on, we shouldn't be fighting like we're in freaking high school. Like, we're adults. We can talk this out. Anyway, the reason being is because of the recent events in regards to RFK Jr.'s autism speech that he gave. And I know this has caused quite an uproar in the autism community, because there's been hints. I don't know if it was directly stated. I didn't watch the speech, but from what I read online, it's either been hinted at or was stated during the speech that he wants to make an autism registry. He wants to find a quote unquote cure for autism by September. And using this supposed autism registry is basically going to bypass HIPAA and essentially take all of our diagnosis reports and study them. And the reason why I say that is because I've seen a lot of people in the autism community kind of freaking out about this. And we all should be worried about this, because and I'm gonna say this by saying this is what I meant earlier by like one side, both sides do things that are right and wrong. The one thing I can get behind with RFK Jr. is the fact that he wants to remove food dyes, and he wants to ban all the same chemicals and food dyes that are banned across the world in the US, because there have been other studies that have proven that these specific chemicals and preservatives and flavorings and things like that we use here in the US are banned across the world, because they have a lot of, they cause a lot of things with health, like be it inflammation, increasing your cancer risk, exacerbating medical symptoms from medical conditions like chronic conditions. So I can get behind that. What I can't get behind is the way that he's targeting autism, because that's just wrong. The way that it's making it sound like is that, oh, well, if you're autistic, you're a problem. Now, here's the thing, is that when you listen to his speech more specifically, he's targeting level 2 and 3 autistics, the ones that may not be able to hold a job and the ones that need 24/7 care because they have more profound levels of autism, right? That is wrong. We all know that. Just because they may never be able to, speak or work a job or anything like that doesn't mean that they're any less than compared to any other human. And I know neurotypicals will argue that, if they can't get past the mentality of a toddler and they're like in their 30s, then what's the point of keeping them alive? Because they're just adult babies. And it's like, yeah, but it's still human life, right? At the end of the day, it's still a human being. And the thing is that neurotypicals really don't do the research. And then the other thing too is when you say, well, I, as someone in the community, find it offensive because I'm autistic, and they go, you're not autistic. You don't act like that. You're not a baby stuck in an adult's body, and crazy unhinged shit that neurotypicals say. That doesn't mean that you're not autistic. It just means that you aren't as affected by your autism spectrum disorder as someone else is. And it's also good to remember that it's a neurological developmental disorder / disability. And that's kind of where that comes in too, because it's called autism spectrum disorder. So is it really a disability if it's a disorder? But then the same thing can be said about like having severe anxiety. Like you can have generalized anxiety disorder and it's such a severe level that you're prone to frequent panic attacks. And panic attacks are debilitating, but severe generalized anxiety disorder is not treated like a disability, despite the fact that panic attacks are debilitating, like as if it was a disability. And I feel like that's kind of where that confusion comes in, because now people look at it and it's like, well, it's a disorder. That doesn't mean that it's debilitating. But at the same time, the way that the autism spectrum disorder spectrum works is that it also depends on all the different categories that autism affects you and at what level. Like think of a pie chart, right? Think of a radial 2D pie chart, and then you just kind of shade in like how much you feel it affects you. So like one thing could be shaded in like a fifth of the way, something could be shaded 80% of the way, something may be shaded 100% of the way, where it's like that one specific thing would like trigger an instant meltdown, and then that becomes very debilitating for you. Whereas like 50% is something that makes you feel really uncomfortable and you would rather avoid it at all costs, but you can still do it. It's just a little uncomfortable. And then it's like 25% or under. It's like, it's a little uncomfortable. You can do it. You don't mind doing it, but you'd kind of rather not. And then obviously like maybe 10% and under is like, it's mildly annoying, but you can push past it. It's not a big deal. And then obviously if it's not shaded, then it doesn't really affect you at all. And that aspect of you is kind of considered normal, because at least by neurotypical standards anyway. So what does this mean for the autism community? This means that we're basically being segregated within our own community. There's the people that are autism spectrum disorder level 1, as that was originally what was known as Asperger's syndrome. And because Asperger's had so many of the exact same, qualities and symptoms that autism had, that's why they merged it with the autism diagnosis, and then they just made that level 1. And then that's where the levels came in. At least that's my understanding of it from when I was reading, like looking this up online. So basically what they're trying to do is make us level 1 autistics and, level 1 ADHD people completely segregated from level 2 and 3. Like, okay, sure, you guys have quote unquote autism, but you're functional. If you guys were to pass on those genes, it wouldn't be a big deal because your offspring would be able to work and do all the other things. The level 2 and 3 autistic people are the problem, because if they were to, have children, then you're just making the deadweight people even more in this country. And it's like, okay, I get it. We live in a capitalist society. We need people to work. We need people to pay taxes. That's kind of how capitalism works, right? But it's still wrong to call these people with profound levels of autism essentially useless by stating things that they can't do. And especially when you lead off with the first thing being paying taxes is like the worst thing that you can do. Now, it'd be one thing if you say that you want to find some way to find not a cure, but maybe develop a medication that would help reduce the symptoms. But then at the same time, it's like it would only do so much because, again, it's a neurological or neurodevelopmental disorder. I forget how to word it right, but like regardless, it's basically, to put it simply, a wiring difference in the brain, and you can't really cure the wiring difference because that's just how your brain developed. You can't like cut open someone's head, go into their brain, and take and go so microscopic into every single nerve ending and connection and every neuron and find all the white matter and gray matter in the brain and like rearrange it and be like, ta-da, now you're neurotypical. That's not how it works. Like, even if you were to try to prevent it at birth, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to be able to prevent it. If someone is born with autism, it's going to happen. And then we also have the issue of vaccines. Do vaccines cause autism? And this is kind of where, for me, I don't really know where I stand, because both sides make a valid point, right? Like, vaccines can't cause autism, makes sense. But at the same time, we also know that everything medically isn't 100% guaranteed. So for example, the flu vaccine every year isn't guaranteed because they have to guess on what the most common flu is going to be for that season. And that's like the main vaccine that they give out. So if you get a different kind of flu, well, they're not going to make a vaccine for that because it was the least common flu. So that's not their problem. They're going to target the flu that has the most cases at that time and be like, okay, so this is going to be the one that has the greatest uptick. So we're going to make the vaccine for this one specifically. So if you get a flu shot for influenza A, even if influenza B is just as, bad, at the end of the day, as long as it's like influenza A has a higher case rate, then they're just going to be like, we're going to make this the flu vaccine for the year. So if you get influenza B, you're fucked, right? And like you have to sit through it. So case in point, the flu vaccine doesn't prevent against all flus, just whatever specific flu has the highest case rate for that year is the specific flu shot that they give out every year. So kind of pointless to not offer all the flu shots for all the different types of flu. But then at the same time, that feels like an overload on vaccines. So basically, it's like, at what point do we say that it doesn't cause autism and autism is an extremely rare but possible side effect from vaccines? Because by that logic, it is entirely possible that yes, it could be a symptom, like a side effect of vaccines, but it is like an extremely rare, like less than 1% chance of it happening. Still possible, just doesn't happen, which would then mean that essentially something like Asperger's, which again is level 1 autism now, is possibly genetic, and it's possibly been around since, the very beginning of time, since the beginning of the human race, right? Which means that you can't cure that, you can't fix that, because that is a genetic thing. Is it possible that vaccines could actually make autism worse? Maybe, but again, that would be like a less than 1% possibility if that were to be true. And then the biggest thing that we also need to remember too is that not every study is fully published. Only the ones that people basically like news outlets or like, I guess, how should I put this? Like very, very wealthy, like medical universities and researchers and, pharmaceutical companies would pay to have these research publicly posted like in newspapers or online. And that doesn't mean that there aren't other researches that have been done that say otherwise. And I think that's like the biggest problem is we're only going off of what the medical field wants us to see. Not everything gets published. So there are probably studies that have like a counter argument to that, which means that really both sides could be wrong and that there's actually some sort of middle ground, or maybe one side really is right. Maybe vaccines do cause autism, but it's a very, very, very low side effect. Or maybe they don't cause autism at all and that it is genetic. But there's also, people that are saying like the new way the vaccines are developed with like the mRNA could be messing with people's genes, and that could be, what triggers autism in toddlers. Like, because if autism level 1, formerly known as Asperger's, is a genetic thing, right? And these mRNA messenger, RNA strands in the vaccines mess with the DNA somehow. I don't know if that's possible. I'm not a scientist, but hypothetically speaking, let's just say that that's what's happening, right? Then it would like theoretically be possible that maybe these mRNA, strands are messing with the DNA of babies and actually turning on that autism gene. It's possible. Do we have research on it? No. So as far as we know, no proven research that that's what's happening means that it's not possible, or that if it were to be possible, it would be a less than 1% chance of it actually happening as a side effect and would be considered a major/critical side effect because it's such a low percentage. But again, that doesn't mean that it's still not possible for it to happen naturally via, your DNA. Because I know there are some research posts that say, yeah, it's genetic. We have a genetic code in our DNA for autism that can be flipped on and off. Okay, that is possible. I don't know because the person did not cite the research, but again, theoretically, it could be possible. Maybe we just haven't discovered it yet. And I think the biggest thing is that we just have to be very, very careful, and we have to stay together as, a community, and we have to make sure that we stand up not just for ourselves, but, people with more profound levels of autism who can't, advocate for themselves, be it because they're nonverbal or, the way that autism affects them. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. Like, we all deserve to live. And again, there's probably some psychotic neurotypicals out there that'll be like, well, if they're dead weight, then, in this society, they don't deserve to live. We should just purge them. And then that also kind of brings up the next thing is that, like, there's also been rumblings that supposedly there was talks about, using the autism registry, that is created from gathering all the data of all the diagnosed, autistic people and essentially sterilizing them. So, for example, before I get into my example, I want to say that that's just rumblings. I don't know if that's confirmed or not, or if that's just something that's going around that people are afraid is going to happen, and now it's being, spread around the internet as true. I don't know. But let's say, hypothetically speaking, that that's the route they wanted to take, right? Which one is eugenics, which is wrong. I mean, that's kind of... eugenics is kind of along the same lines as, like, genocide, basically. Because now you're saying the autistic community doesn't matter. They're a blight on humanity. They deserve to die. So we're just going to sterilize all the autistic people so they can't breed anymore. And problem solved. Which, by the way, no, it's not. There are probably people that are neurotypicals that carry the autism gene that if they were to have a child would be autistic. So really, you'd have to sterilize the entire US population at that point to be safe, which means nobody can breed, which means our country would die out, which I'm surprised that they didn't even think about that. But then again, when you got older people that still believe in the older ways, I guess you don't really tend to think about the present, nor does your brain tend to think as quickly the older that you get. But yeah, you would basically have to sterilize every person in the US to make sure that they don't have babies, because there's a chance that they can have an autistic child. Like, if you really want to get rid of autism, you would have to kill off the entire US population. So yeah, good luck with that. But that's basically what I guess I just gave my example, because the example was going to be like, if that were to be true, they would want to sterilize all the autistic people. But like I just said, then you would have to sterilize all the neurotypical people, because some of them actually carry the genes for autism. And then even then, you would have to look into the way, if people truly believe that vaccines cause autism, then they would have to look at how the vaccines are being made and try to figure out what is causing the vaccines to flip that autistic gene on in humans. So then they can rework all the vaccines so that it doesn't do that. And even then, that would take years of research. So in reality, no matter how you look at it, it doesn't really matter, because you're never going to be able to get rid of it if it is in our genetic code. And if somebody has that gene flipped on and they have a child with someone who may have the gene that's flipped off, then there's a chance that the gene will be turned on in the child and the child will be autistic. And then there's the aspect of environmental factors, which people and researchers feel can exacerbate and make autism develop even worse. And in other words, basically, you could start off as a level 1 autistic, and as from your toddler years to like your early preteen years, your environmental factors, like, the things that you eat, the people that you interact with at school, the way the schools treat you, the way your parents treat you, the way your families treat you, and then just other things like maybe if you have allergies to seasonal allergies, all those things that can affect you at those young ages when your brain is developing could actually increase the way the autism spectrum disorder affects you, effectively making you go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3. But really and truly, environmental factors, at least from my understanding, determine essentially how it'll make your specific autism symptoms worse. So it doesn't make them worse over time, it just will increase them. So if, for example, if I didn't have chronic rhinitis, right? So if my sense of smell was normal because my sinuses wouldn't be pretty much permanently inflamed, I had a sensitive sense of smell until all those years growing up, not knowing that I had seasonal allergies, pretty much damaged my sinuses. So now they're permanently inflamed. So now my sense of smell is pretty dulled out, slightly below average in that of a neurotypical. So, yeah, it kind of sucks. But when I was little, anything that smelled really bad would make me throw up. And even now with the chronic rhinitis, there are still some smells that'll make me puke. Like when my friend and his wife had their son, and I went over there to visit, he was like, "Oh yeah, I gotta change his diaper really quick. Give me a second." And he changed the diaper, and I smelt the baby diaper, and I kid you not, that was so bad that I was going to throw up. If I did not have my chronic rhinitis, I probably would have puked right on the spot. That's how sensitive my sense of smell is from autism because of the sensory issues. Just like for me, I'm I'm sensitive to light. So not to the point where I would have to wear sunglasses, but it takes my eyes a few seconds to adjust to lighting. So if it's, a sunny day out and I haven't opened my blinds yet, right? I open my blinds, and if the sun is shining right in my window and it hits my eyes, First of all, my eyes start to sting like as if they're dried out, right? And then I'll just sneeze. And that could be anywhere from like one time to like 5 times in a row because it's just like so overwhelming visually, I guess, that it like triggers the nerves that are connected to my nose or whatever nerves cause you to sneeze. So it like makes me sneeze. Which is really weird. And I didn't know why that always happened when I was younger. And then when I was diagnosed with autism and then learned about sensory issues, I'm like, oh, that probably explains a lot. So, do I wear sunglasses? No. I have transition lenses, but I probably should get sunglasses so that way when I do go outside, it's not like an immediate, oh my God, it's so bright out. And then I sneeze like 4 times in a row and I go, ow, that hurt. My eyes sting a little bit, but that's okay. I'm good now. So I guess I'm lucky in that aspect of like once my eyes take a few seconds to adjust, like I'm good to go. And then my transition lenses kick in and then I'm good. But yeah, generally speaking, light does that to me. So that's like saying that if I was younger, that if they would have kept me, like my parents would have kept me inside 24/7, never let me go outside, and I was homeschooled. And for the very first time in like my early teens, I finally get to set foot outside. My eyes would basically, my sensory issue to like being sensitive to light would be so bad that my eyes would be in so much pain that I'd probably go into a meltdown, is kind of my understanding of how environmental factors work. But generally speaking, environmental factors affect everyone, neurotypical or not. Like, your home life, your school life, your family life, like that stuff really affects who you become as a person because that's how you learn what to do, what not to do, what is acceptable, what's not acceptable. And that's where neurotypicals learn all their stupid, unwritten social rules that nobody ever wants to explain and just expects everyone to know, which, by the way, is extremely stupid. I don't know why they have to keep it hidden. Like, come on, people. Like, that's like communication 101, is if there is something that bugs you, you say it. So if there are all these stupid unwritten rules, neurotypicals should be telling you right away when you don't do something. And then that way you can go, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And then you can Google it and be like, why is this socially acceptable? And then, you can find like a neurodivergent person explain, well, this is why neurotypicals like to do this because this makes sense in their brain, but it doesn't make sense in our brain. So it kind of gives you more of a breakdown like, oh, okay, now I kind of understand it. But it would also just be better if they just communicated it in the first place. And I feel like we as neurodivergent people, once we step into our own power and we learn to advocate for ourselves or have somebody advocate for us if we can't speak because we're nonverbal, that it becomes a lot easier to just be like, well, I don't like how these rules are. Like, I feel like essentially we become better communicators because we advocate our needs, right? So we stand up for ourselves. We say, hey, as an autistic person, this is what I need. Or, hey, as an ADHD person, this is what I need. Or, hey, as an ADHD person, this is what I need. And then it makes it easier to challenge people on their concepts and their beliefs of their limited knowledge of both autism and ADHD. And then you kind of start to show people, oh, there is more to this, disorder / disability than I really gave it credit for. Like, yeah, sure, it's listed as a disorder, but when you really compare it to anxiety being, if you have really bad generalized anxiety disorder, your panic attacks become debilitating, then in a way, technically, anxiety should be considered a disability, which now makes autism spectrum disorder make more sense as to why it's a disability, even though we call it a disorder. Because generally speaking, it's a spectrum, so it may not be as debilitating for one autistic person as it is for another person, which makes the whole sense of levels kind of not make as much sense, right? Because now it's just like, when you say levels, you're talking about like a linear level as opposed to like a radial level of, if these X amount of symptoms, reach past 33%, then you're level 2. If they reach past 66%, then you're level 3. And then you take a look and be like, oh, well, I'm level 3 in this aspect, but I'm level 1 in this aspect. And then you average them all out. And then you go, okay, now I can confidently say that you are a level 1 autistic. Yeah, sure, there are some things that, you may hit level 2 and some things that you may hit level 3 on. But generally speaking, the way that you operate, and everything that we've seen so far, you're generally speaking, you're level 1, unless certain criteria are met, then you spike to level 2 or spike to level 3. But you don't really, I guess it kind of calls into the question, because I know there's some people that say that they feel like they're regressing. But I think it's a matter of, it depends on your environmental factor, your life, your work life, home life, marriage / relationship, family life, where you live, your current financial situation, and then just, because some things may exacerbate your symptoms. So like maybe you would be considered level 1 in this aspect, but when you take in all those stressors and you add it into it, and then your stress bleeds into that, there is a chance that you do regress and you become a level 2 autistic person, or a level 3 autistic person when you have those stressors and you are in that environment. But as soon as you like move somewhere better and you have like a better job that's not as stressful but pays the same or if not better, then you don't really spike as much. You know what I mean? It's like kind of like the same thing. If you were to look at emotional regulation, a lot of us have emotional dysregulation. So for me, with emotional dysregulation, I'm sensitive. I'll admit it. I'm a dude, and I'm very, very emotional. So like when my dad used to sit there and belittle me and cuss me out and call me all these names, it would make me cry. And when I cried, I would basically go into a meltdown because I just didn't understand why my dad essentially hated me so much. Even though he didn't hate me, my dad loves me, but like when he would talk to me like that, it made me felt like he hated me. Like, like I wasn't a good enough son. Like I wasn't man enough. And it's not my fault. It's because of the autism, right? Like that's just part of being on the spectrum. And that's part of why I go to therapy. So I can learn emotional regulation. So I can learn how to manage it. Does it mean that I'm still not going to be sensitive and have a meltdown? Of course not. It's still going to happen. But if I can learn ways to manage it, or at least try to manage it and see if it's possible, then, it's way less likely to happen. And I feel like that's the other thing, is we don't have enough tools and accommodations and just an overall sense of acceptance in the community, that we are only limited on how much we can advocate for ourselves and what people can provide as accommodations and how much work we can put in, because not everything in therapy may work for every autistic person. There are some things that might work for me that won't work for you, and that's kind of what the biggest issue is that rather than trying to study more about autism to try to quote unquote cure it and prevent it, we should instead be using that research to be like, oh, you know what? There are probably many more ways to manage autism that we didn't even know about. Now we have even more tools to work with, and now we have even more ways to advocate for ourselves, and now we have even more ways to have an even playing field with neurotypicals. But the problem is that that's not what this research that RFK Jr. is trying to do. It's to try to prevent and cure autism. And it's like, again, I love the fact that he wants to cut out all the, ban all the same things that the rest of the world has banned, right? That's great. But when it comes to autism, he's already kind of not my favorite person. And the fact that he immediately went for that is sad, right? Like I read somewhere that his mom was actually an autistic advocate. So the fact that her son, and she's probably rolling in her grave right now, seeing how her son wants to cure autism, especially if it is true that she was an autistic advocate, then that's just pretty sad. And it is entirely possible that, you know what, maybe he does have family members that are on the spectrum that are level 2 or level 3. And to him, he's like, man, if only I could help them and make them feel normal, which is fine. But you can't force that on the rest of the world. You can't force that on the rest of the country, on the rest of the autistic people that are comfortable with, how they are. And then that's the other thing, too, is that not every autistic person likes being autistic. I've seen, Reddit posts and forum posts where people are like, man, I wish I wasn't autistic. If they could find a cure, I would totally take it and be neurotypical because I hate being autistic. And then there are some autistic people that love being autistic. They love, the issues that they have is well worth the experience of being autistic. I'm one of those people that likes being ADHD, for example. But there are other ADHD people that would rather be neurotypical, So if this research were to, quote unquote, yield a way to cure autism, not everybody would want to take that cure. Like, I wouldn't. I love being ADHD. It's what's made me who I am. And if you take that away from me, I am not me anymore. And now I'm more susceptible to becoming corrupted by power. I'm more susceptible to manipulating others and stepping on others to get where I want to be, which again is wrong. And that's why I don't understand why neurotypicals do, the shit that they do. But it's like, I feel like because a lot of us have faced a lot of adversity in our lives, that's what, that's why a lot of us have that strong sense of justice, because a lot of us have been through a lot. Nobody stood up for us, and it was always our fault. So that's where a lot of us have that strong sense of justice. But that strong sense of justice that we develop over our lifetimes, if we've been through hard times in our lives, is what also gives us that morality to know right from wrong and be like, as much as I want to be like you and, get to where you're at, I want to do it the proper way and not step on other people and lie and manipulate my way through, my work or through a relationship just to be happy or just to get to the top, right? And I feel like everyone is valid in how they feel, autism affects them, how ADHD affects them, how having both autism and ADHD, aka ADHD, affects them. And it really should be up to the people if they were to find out that it was magically a disease, whether people would want to take the cure or not, right? And yet, meanwhile, before I close this off, because I'm hitting 40 minutes, and it may not be 40 minutes after I edit this, but since recording-wise I'm hitting 40 minutes, I just want to wrap up with saying, we're wasting all of this funding to try to, quote-unquote, cure and prevent autism, and we're not putting that towards finding a cure for cancer? Like, hello? Excuse me? But that's pretty much it for this week's episode of Divergence and Divine. As always, if you guys enjoyed this week's episode, drop a like, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, because the notification bell will let you know when I upload new episodes of the podcast. And with that, I'm going to get editing, get this up later on tonight because it's Friday. And again, you guys know I work weekends, so I work tomorrow. But yeah, I hope you guys have a good weekend and a good, week next week as well. And I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.